Today we're going to talk about a revolution that changed the face of the world.
Throughout the history, there were many revolutions. Some of them had the same reason, and some of them had different incentives in leading a revolt. Going through a revolution always means that consequences happen. The Brazilian Revolution is one of these important revolutions that we're going to look at. There are many common things that come out to be the result of the revolution, such as the fall of the king, freedom, equality, and so much more.
Before we look at the consequences, let's look at Brazil in its colonial times. Brazil was a normal country that had been colonized by Portugal. The first signs of revolt was when Jocam José da Silva Xavier, also known as Tiradentes, led a revolutionary movement that was in the name of the Brazilian people, though unfortunately, he failed and was arrested in 1789, and was hanged. Even though the first revolt was a failure, it served as an example for other rebellions to create an enormous amount of consequences for the Brazilian history. In 1822, Brazil continues to have free war for freedom of the Brazilian people.
The Brazilian revolt was influenced mainly by Europe. Things happening in Europe eventually gave Brazil the idea of a revolt. That's why Pedro I eventually declared Brazil's independence, and eventually he became the emperor. Another reason of the revolution was because of the unfair social status of Portugal. After the revolution, the influence of the Portugal was gone, and Brazil finally had more equal social status. Now to the main point. Events such as these contributed to the end result. The revolt was mainly for Portugal to get out of Brazilian soil. Again, the Brazilian revolt was influenced mainly by Europe. So, when Pedro I wanted to make prominent changes, he realized that the government was against his great changes, because the rich are part of the constitutional government, and the more changes happens, the more their lives change, and since they like their life, they don't want great change. For example, the rich like slavery because it gets them money, though Pedro I wants to abolish slavery, and so the rich, as known as the other part of the government, are against him.
The Brazilian Revolution affected the citizens' feelings towards other countries. Going back to the Pernambucan Revolution, the revolt itself had the course of losing conspirators of Marshal William Carr Beresford and his conspirators. This event caused the citizens to have anti-British feelings. Even though there were some harsh feelings for British, a good outcome was that when the British saved the royal family of Portugal, trading of African slaves was abolished. The consequence made a good impact on Brazil.
Now, on to the social consequence of the Brazilian Revolution. As I have said before, the enlightened idea of equality has arisen, making native people less susceptible to racism. Also, there was elimination of the absolute monarch after this revolt, and the elimination of middlemen of Portugal. After the war in Rio de Plata, it changed into the Cisplatin province, which was a long-term effect. Also, one of the good consequences were, after the Supreme Military Council was set up, the Supreme Military Council was able to set up the specialized courses of study, which made a step toward higher education. The Brazilian Revolution was a revolution of many outcomes, to many things, and for the freedom of the people.
In conclusion, the Brazilian Revolution was an excellent example of the multiple consequences that Brazil and its outerlying countries had faced. Brazil was a normal colony region that took off its shackles and made its way to freedom, though the walk to freedom is never easy and always violent, and the effects of the revolt are never small and lead to many consequences.